Союзное Вече представляет актуальная повестка, новые факты и волнительные прогнозы только в программе Евгения Давутова «На связи».
Здравствуйте, дорогие зрители! В эфире очередной выпуск.
Good evening, dear viewers. We are talking through the Na Связи channel. My name is Evgeny Davutov, and you can subscribe to our channel. And, we are also talking on behalf of the union between Russia and Belarus on our channel. And we have our stream too. And, you can put likes if you like us. Every comment of yours makes it possible for us to push forward our cause. Military analyst and ex-Marine colonel of the United States, Scott Ritter, is my guest. Good afternoon, or whatever time of the day it is.
Thank you very much. Just a quick correction. Thank you for the promotion, but I was just a major.
Да, простите, хорошо, майор.
Excuse me, Major.
Первый вопрос, который я вам хочу.
The first question that goes to you, and I believe that Mr. Trump is prompting us here, because we have heard an announcement that he has made. So my first question is the following. For example, if we look at Russia and at other countries that are waiting or awaiting long-deserved peace, are going through a euphoria after the summit between Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, and the president of the U.S., Donald Trump. They met in Alaska, but I would like to take a different look at this. What happened this summer? Well, the special military operation is going on, and there was a 12-day war between Israel and Iran. And, it ended after the bombings by the U.S. Air Force of Iran. And if we look at Alaska, we will see that Trump tried to put pressure, psychological pressure, on President Putin, because there was a B-2 bomber, the invisible bomber, as we call it, flying over both presidents. Do you, Major, feel a euphoria after that summit? What is your analysis, so to say? Because, Donald Trump said this, quote unquote. He said that he doesn't want to participate in the Putin-Zelensky summit. He said that they are like oil and vinegar. They don't go together for certain reasons, but I would like to see them meet and to see how they cope after that summit. But meanwhile, they are killing people and they are at war, which is stupid. That's what Trump said several minutes ago. What do you think about it?
I think we have to put this in a proper perspective. This time last year, the United States and Russia were headed on a course that could lead to nuclear war. The CIA assessed in the fall of 2024 that there was a better than 50% chance that the United States and Russia would have a nuclear war before the end of the year. This was primarily because of Russia's newly announced nuclear doctrine and the conflict this doctrine would have with policies that were being considered by the Biden administration that would allow Ukraine to use Western weapons to strike deep into Russia. Now we have President Trump meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. I'm euphoric, aren't you? Or would you rather go to the gambling table and roll the dice and see how lucky we get with nuclear war? Because I'll tell you this, if Kamala Harris had won the election and the Biden administration's policy towards Russia were continued, I'd say that we probably would be at a nuclear war already. So I'm pretty relieved. I'm pretty happy about things. Is it perfect? No. The other thing I think we need to keep in mind is that Donald Trump doesn't have the same luxury that President Putin has. President Putin has 25 years of continuity. He has the complete support of the Russian people. 85%, I think, of the last poll that was taken. He has a government that's not sharpening the knives to stab him in the back. Donald Trump, on the other hand, campaigned on a promise of peace, and his political base supports this effort, but he has to deal with a mainstream media that is infected with Russophobia. He has to deal with academia, all of the major academic institutions that are infected with Russophobia. He has to deal with the permanent bureaucracy, the deep state, which is infected with Russophobia, and who are stabbing him in the back continuously as he tries to move forward with peace. So, he says things, and if you take it at face value, you'd say, well, that's not a very friendly thing to say, or that's not a very positive thing to say. Judge him on his actions. He met with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Now, people are talking about the B-2 and the F-22 and the F-35 fighters that flew over the head. First of all, if anybody thinks that Vladimir Putin would be intimidated by this display, they don't know the Russian president. Two, I think the people that think this was an act of intimidation don't understand American military protocol. Because the reality is, to have a flyover of that nature is the highest level of respect possible. Flyovers like that aren't done casually. When a flyover takes place, it's an act of celebration. It's not an act of intimidation. Or else, my goodness, every time an American formation of fighter planes flies over the Super Bowl, what, are they trying to intimidate the people below? No. It's saying, we respect you. This is our military. This is an act of honor. At funerals, only the highest ranking American diplomats and generals get a flyover at a funeral. Vladimir Putin got a flyover from a B-2 bomber, 2 F-22s, and two F-35s. This is world class. This is Donald Trump saying, I respect you. And that's the way it was meant, and that's the way it should be taken.
Понятно. Ну, будем надеяться, что
That's
Дональд
clear,
Трамп,
and let's hope that Donald Trump
просто делать такие эффекты,
is capable of these effects, like Joseph Stalin once did. But you are saying that we should not take Trump for his word, but we should look at his actions, right? And very often I read the Telegram channel of Alexander Artamonov, our military expert, and you interviewed him some time ago, Mr. Artamonov. And in his Telegram channel, he publishes many maps. And very often I interview him too when he is explaining things. He says, if you look at what NATO is doing in Europe, you can see that Europe and NATO as a bloc are getting prepared for a war with Russia. This is what you mean, not to judge by the word, right?
Well, and that's his assessment, but I would challenge that assessment. Poland has 14 days worth of artillery ammunition. Is that getting ready for war with Russia? 14 days? The British army is shrinking as we speak. Is that getting ready for war with Russia? The French army can't deploy any meaningful power outside of its shores. The last major logistics exercise it carried out a year ago, 12,500 troops was the maximum number that France could actually deploy in an expeditionary fashion. Is that a threat to Russia? Germany has no military worthy of the name. They speak boldly about building something, but gosh, I think there was a poll in Germany that said if Germany was attacked, only 16% of the German men would be willing to die for their country. 16% if they were attacked. Now imagine if Germany makes the mistake of trying to attack Russia. How many Germans would be willing to die for that? The point is, NATO is all talk and no action. All talk and no action. There is no military force in NATO capable of challenging Russia on a meaningful basis in Ukraine without American military support. And America will not deploy either soldiers or aircraft in a conflict with Russia over Ukraine. So I am dismissive of NATO. I'm dismissive of Europe. Politically, yes, it's problematic what they're doing. But where is the defense industry in Europe to back up this desire to rebuild? The defense industry is non-existent because they deindustrialized because of the blowback of sanctioning Russian energy. The economies can't support this. How long will the people of Europe allow pensions to be denied and other social programs to be eliminated because some politician says Russia's a threat worthy of bankrupting them even further? No, There is no map of Europe that shows NATO posing a real threat. Count the divisions, then count those divisions that could actually get out of a barracks. There is no threat whatsoever. That's my assessment.
А откуда тогда такая самоуверенность у
And
Зеленского?
why is Zelensky so self-assured?
Те предложения, которые
Why isn't he accepting the proposals coming from Russia to resolve the conflict peacefully? What do you think?
Well, let's be honest here. What is the future of Zelensky? I mean, is he going to be the president of Ukraine once conflict is ended? No. He'll probably, if he stays in Ukraine, be arrested and prosecuted for crimes because he's a criminal. He committed gross acts of corruption. When the truth comes out about the number of Ukrainians that have been killed in this conflict, and according to information coming from a hack of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, 1.7 million dead. 1.7 million dead, 625,000 killed this year alone, and this year's not done. And the kill ratios are only climbing. So there's a potential to bring the number of dead to over 2 million by year's end. When that truth hits home, when it can't be disguised anymore, Zelensky's a dead man walking. He has no future. So his only options today are to cut and run or to stay and hope that people will rally around his cause. He has 3.5 years of precedent where he blusters, puts out the tin cup, begs for money, and the West has delivered. Why does Zelensky continue to stay there and talk big? Because it's worked in the past. But I think eventually he's going to find out that this time around, the world's not buying his bluster. He is not the Ukrainian Winston Churchill, and the world is not willing to die on the Ukrainian beaches against Russia.
Да, вы абсолютно правы.
Yes, that's right. You're absolutely correct, and I agree. Another question with Belarus. Well, as you understand, we are union with Belarus, Russia and Belarus. Well, it's interesting to know, when Trump was on his way to Alaska, Lukashenko called him. Lukashenko is the president of Belarus, and we remember that during the 12-day war, Iran and Israel, Keith Kellogg met with Lukashenko and they spoke for 6 hours. If we look at the former Soviet Union, we can say that Belarus is an absolutely stable republic. Well, it has a good order, an order in a good way. And in the long run, Belarus has become a space, a territory where it is possible to hold talks between the West and the East, between Russia and Europe or the United States.
Как будет себя вести Соединенные Штаты Америки?
How will the United States be treating Belarus in the future? Will they follow the line that Donald Trump has taken when people get together to negotiate, to discuss things, not only to discuss Ukraine, but to discuss Israel, Gaza, and so on? What kind of world order do you see in the future? Because Lukashenko, in his 30 years in power, has displayed that he is very calm and that he can speak as an equal with leaders of world powers. And I believe that other politicians should be envious.
I don't debate that last point. Other politicians should be envious. How many people spoke to President Trump on his way to meet President Putin in Alaska? The fact that President Lukashenko was able to have that conversation speaks volumes about the high regard that Donald Trump holds to the president of Belarus. Donald Trump likes men of principle, people of principle, and strong people. And your president is a very strong person. He's a very principled person. He's somebody who's well known for speaking his mind. He doesn't hold anything back. And yet he's calm. He's a man who is willing to find alternatives to conflict. He has served in a mediating role. Belarus was right after the special military operation began, was chosen in Gomel to be the place where Ukrainians and Russians met to begin the process of negotiating a potential peace. So this is a sharp departure from just a few years ago. I mean, I remember turning on the television and seeing your president get off a helicopter holding an AK-47 in his hand, challenging the demonstrators to come to him at a time when the collective West was doing its best to foment a color revolution in Belarus. And that still is the goal and objective of America's allies in Europe. There are still opposition forces resident in the Baltics, in Poland, and elsewhere who are conspiring against your president. And this time last year, they had the full support of the United States government, which means that they had the full support of the diplomatic machinery of the United States. Donald Trump has been president for less than a year. We're coming up a little bit around the half-year mark. There is still significant machinery in the United States that views President Lukashenko as a problem, as the enemy. And Donald Trump has to wrestle with this. There's a reason why the State Department is being purged by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because this permanent bureaucracy that's infected with Russophobia, and Russophobia extends into Belarus, isn't going away unless it's compelled to leave. And what President Trump is doing is showing leadership. He's saying that I want peace. And to have peace, you have to have normal relations with people. Would President Trump agree with everything that President Lukashenko says, or would President Lukashenko agree with everything President Trump says? No, not at all. But at least they could sit down together, have a fair and open exchange of ideas, and work through their problems towards a common objective. Because I do believe at the end of the day, President Trump wants the same thing that President Lukashenko wants: a stable, peaceful world where the threat of nuclear war doesn't hang over everybody's head.
Да, но тут надо еще понимать все-таки такой
That's
момент,
right, but let us understand one more thing, that there is the so-called deep state.
присутствует в Соединенных Штатах Америки.
And a deep state is something that you find in the government, at the in the highest echelons of power in the United States, and this deep state has different goals from us. So where do we find, how to put it, where do you find the right line to follow, the right course to follow? Because, well, we know that Trump and Putin and Lukashenko can meet and they can find a common denominator, but there may be provocations. We see that people who are backing Zelensky are trying to get Belarus to become part of the war. What do you think?
There's no doubt that there's a foundation of opposition to Russia and Belarus that exists here in the United States. Again, as I've said over and over again, Russophobia has infected this country to a degree that might not even be comprehensible to you. You're aware of Russophobia, you're aware of what it is, but I'm here to tell you that it is deeply infected America, deeply infected. The mainstream media can't say anything nice about Russia, is incapable of saying anything nice about Russia. They don't know what the truth of Russia is. They don't want to know what the truth of Russia is. They just want to promulgate stories that paint Russia in a negative light to influence the American people. That's why I go to Russia. I mean, I go to Russia for a number of reasons. One, I'm a Russian historian, Soviet historian. So Belarus is a place that I've studied as well. And I'm fascinated by it. I really am. I just think it's such a rich culture, rich heritage, rich tradition, rich history. I want to know everything I can learn about it. But beyond my personal desires, there's my human desire. I want to live in peace. And it's imperative to live in peace that we have to know and understand the Russian people and the Belarusian people. In order to do that, we have to meet with you. We have to talk with you. We have to capture your opinions, your reality, and then bring it back to the United States and begin the long and difficult process of trying to erase Russophobia from the minds of the American people. But this is hard because you've mentioned the deep state. It's not just mainstream media, it's academia. You're familiar with Michael McFaul, the former ambassador of the United States to Russia under Barack Obama. He currently runs, the Stanford University Russian area program. He's the man polluting the minds of the next generation of so-called Russian experts. We have Victoria Nuland doing the same in Columbia University. At Georgetown University, where my daughter just recently graduated with a master's degree in Russian area studies, South Caucasian specialty, she accompanied me to my trip to Russia back in December of 2023, January of 2024. She had a wonderful opportunity. She got to see Russia, got to experience Russian culture. We got to see the Nutcracker in St. Petersburg on Christmas Eve at the original theater. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that if you appreciate Russian culture. But she also got to sit down with Ramzan Kadyrov and have lunch with this man and talk to him. When she came back to Georgetown, instead of embracing her and wanting to know what she saw and what she learned, they threatened to kick her out of the program, to ostracize her. Because how dare she go to Russia? How dare she learn about Russia? Because her truth runs counter to the narrative being promulgated by Georgetown leadership. We have a problem in academia because our academic institutions today are polluting the minds of the next generation of diplomats, businessmen, people who will deal with Russia. And then we have the deep state, as you've mentioned. I can do what I can to correct the perceptions that are put out by mainstream media, and that's my major effort today. And indirectly, I can try and influence academic institutions, and we are having success. The deep state is another issue. It has to be cleaned by the government. And here, I don't know if you've been following the work of Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. She is in the process of cleaning house on the deep state that's been infected by Russophobia. Because it's not about ideology. If it was just about ideology, this would be almost a mission impossible. But it's about criminal activity, the weaponization of the deep state to undermine American democracy. What they did to Donald Trump in 2016, 2020, what they tried to do in 2024. This is criminal activity. It's also against the national security interests of the United States. So as we speak, investigations are taking place against many of the critical components of the deep state. And if it continues in this way, I think you will see criminal accountability, people brought to trial, perhaps even imprisoned. Already, she stripped the security clearances away from many people of the deep state. In the past, if you held a high government job, when you returned to civilian life, you maintained your security clearances, which allowed you to interact and influence national security issues. She's removed that ability from a significant component of the deep state. There's a lot of work left to be done. And as an American, I feel we need to be very careful because there's a thin line between prosecuting crimes and weaponizing the legal establishment to go after people who are guilty of nothing other than free speech. I disagree, for instance, with everything John Bolton, the former national security advisor, says about Russia, vehemently disagrees. But I protect his right to say it. And I hope that the FBI raiding his home today wasn't about free speech, but rather about, a real crime and that the evidence of this crime. I myself had 40 FBI agents come into my house last year. Why? Because of what I said, because I was promoting peace with Russia. That was criminalized. That can never happen in this country. And so I hope that as we seek to diminish the deep state, it's done not because they're speaking out. They have every right to speak out and say what they want, even if I disagree with it. It's because of real criminal activity. It's a scary time to be in America today because the legal establishment has been weaponized in the past, and there's always a temptation on the part of government to weaponize it going forward. And that's not the United States of America. The United States of America is a land that promotes free speech. If I disagree with John Bolton, my job isn't to shut him up. My job is to put out better ideas. That's why I travel to Russia. That's why I talk to Russians. That's why I listen to Russians. And that's why I come back and share their opinions. Because through this process, I have better ideas. And I will beat John Bolton every time in a debate. But I don't want him silenced because he says things that I oppose to. I want him ignored because nobody agrees with his opinions.
Да, ну, во-первых, я хочу сказать вам
That's
огромное
right.
спасибо, что
I
вы
wanted to thank you very much that you
Вам
do
нравится наша
visit Russia.
культура,
Thank you very much
что вы
for
делаете такие вот
being a fan of
замечательные
Russian
интервью, как вот
culture,
вчера
and
вышло у
thank you
вас
very
интервью
much
с
for the
Никитой
interviews.
Михалковым,
And
очень
well,
интересно,
yesterday you had
такое
an
очень
interview
длинное.
with Nikita Mikhalkov.
Сейчас вы ответили
Very
на
interesting,
то,
a
что
very
происходит
good, profound
в
interview. Thank you
Беларуси.
very much.
То есть в
Well,
культурном
you
плане вы
were
рассказали
talking
про
about
определенные
Russia and
государства, а мне
America,
интересно
culture,
узнать
deep
как
state,
военного аналитика,
and so on. I wanted to ask you as a military
насколько
analyst,
велика вероятность того, что Запад может
how
пойти
probable
на
is it
провокацию
that
против
the
Беларуси?
West might start a provocation against Belarus?
Belarus has done a lot to ensure its security in the past couple years. I think when President Lukashenko finally decided to act about the Union state and to embrace it and to become part of it, it made him immune to a direct Western attack. And now, thanks to the special military operation and the irresponsible policies of Europe and the United States, Russia's nuclear umbrella has been directly extended over Belarus. Belarus now has its own nuclear capabilities that are inherent. The Su-25 delivered munitions, the Iskander, and now Archnik is coming. So Belarus and Russia are now an extension of the same. An attack against Belarus is an attack against Russia and will receive the total response that would be due such. This makes Belarus immune to direct military intervention by the West. It enhances the security of Belarus in a way that was never possible before. And yet, Lukashenko is his own man. He's the leader of a sovereign state. Belarus is its own nation with its own, traditions and values and such. Their values happen to coincide with Russia, but the notion that by joining the Union state, Belarus is erased and no longer, an independent, viable entity is, I believe, absurd. I think what's happened is by securing its future by joining this Union state, Belarus has the ability to even become more of an independent sovereign state because it can do so freely. When your people are worried about dealing with color revolutions, dealing with hybrid warfare coming over the border, it diminishes a nation. Not because they're bad, it just means that they're distracted. They're doing things. Right now, Belarus can work on being Belarus, and it's pretty cool. I'm hopeful that in my next visit, I'll be able to come to Minsk and see Belarus firsthand. It's something I've always wanted to do. And, I like I said, I've been studying your history, your culture for a long time. It's always better to see it firsthand than it is to read about it in a book, though.
И, наверное, вам бы хотелось бы взять
And
Александра
I
Григорьевича.
believe that you are dreaming of interviewing Lukashenko, right?
Who wouldn't? He's a man of history, and he's a man whose opinion counts. I mean, let's be frank. This is a man who speaks not only to President Putin on a regular basis. I mean, you saw them get together before the summit. They met in President Putin's dacha up in Lake Volga, I believe. The friendship is evident in the way that they treated one another. And so why wouldn't you want to interview such a man? And he spoke to my president, and my president treated him with respect. This is a man whose opinion should be valued by everybody. His judgment should be valued. And there are many topics that I would like to talk to him, which I think, his opinion would resonate with the American public.
Я полностью солидарен с вашим
I absolutely subscribe to what you are saying. So this dream is good. Interview Lukashenko one day.
It's good to dream.
Да, yes.
That's right.
Следующий вопрос, который вам хочу задать.
My next question.
Я хочу процитировать.
Before I go to the question, I wanted to quote Joseph Stalin. He said this in November 1920. 20, talking to a correspondent from Pravda. He said, the Caucasus is very important for the revolution because it's a source, it's not only a source of raw materials, but it's a geopolitical position between Russia and Turkey is very important. Batum, Baku, Batum, Tabriz road, Batum, Tabriz, Erzurum are very important. And while Antanta is considering this very important because they want to control the road from Europe to Transcaucasia. Whoever controls Transcaucasia and these roads, our revolution or Antanta or somebody else will control the region. And well, we see that the Musavat movement in the Caucasus against the revolution will actually undermine the position of the revolutionaries. Many Russian experts believe that after Armenia has signed a peace agreement with Azerbaijan with the mediation of Trump, means that Donald Trump has actually pushed Anglo-Saxons, well, the Brits, from this region between Baku, Yerevan, and Caucasus as such. But now, well, Iran is saying that it will not allow them to use the Angizor corridor in Armenia to get from Europe to the South Caucasus. So do you think that Joseph Stalin's words are resonating well today?
I believe that, roughly speaking, his words are an accurate reflection of the current reality. I mean, we only have to look to, a few years past when the RAND Corporation, an American think tank with close connectivity with the Defense Department, the CIA, and the State Department, talked about the importance of creating regions of instability on the periphery of the Russian Federation, and the Caucasus region is one of those. The United States, in previous administrations, targeted the Caucasus, Georgia in particularly. We did our best to turn Georgia into a second front against Russia to remove some of the pressure off of Ukraine. And now we see similar activity by the European Union, the Entente, to quote Joseph Stalin, about Armenia. And of course, the Turkish relationship with Azerbaijan, is reflective of the similar relationship between the CIA and Azerbaijan, between the Israelis and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was weaponized by the CIA, by Israel, against Iran. From a Russian perspective, one of the big geopolitical moves that they've made in recent times is to talk about the North-South economic corridor, basically connecting Russia with Iran through rail line and sea lines of communication that run through the South Caucasus. The Zangezur corridor effectively creates a wall that can block this North-South connectivity. I don't know if Donald Trump, when he sought this solution, was thinking about the geopolitical consequences of this. I believe he was looking for conflict resolution without a deeper understanding of what this is the danger of the deep state, because the deep state can play, a game with the president, say, oh, yes, pursue peace here, but not brief the president fully on what the consequences are. The consequences of this Donald Trump brokered peace is not peace, but it brings about the inevitability of war. First of all, it is now empowered Azerbaijan to become very aggressive against Russia. And this has led to, escalation of relations. There's some talk that some of Russia's military strikes in Ukraine were sending a signal to Azerbaijan by taking out refining capacity that was being used by Azerbaijan to, convert its oil into products that could be sold. We now see a situation where Iran is threatening military action, and there's some rumors that Russia might be moving some troops down into the region as well, troops from the Ural district to move in. There's a real potential of war. What I would also say is that Georgia hasn't been taken off the map yet, meaning that even though Georgia has refused to become a second front, we just saw with the visit of the Turkish or the Georgian president to Turkey last week that Georgia is still a nation that could tilt to the West and then be used by the West against. And, tilting with Turkey means that Georgia would now become part of the Turkish, Armenian, Azerbaijani axis. Russia needs to take this seriously. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but I would say that the sooner Russia could normalize relations with Georgia, the better. And the more security guarantees that Russia could provide Georgia, the better. Georgia is a natural friend of Russia. And if Russia can bring Georgia into the fold, not in terms of union state type connectivity, but in terms of peaceful coexistence with normalized diplomatic relations, it sets a standard that then could influence Armenia and could also therefore diminish the role that Azerbaijan's trying to play. But the West is trying to turn the Caucasus, especially the southern Caucasus region, into an area of instability for Russia. And if Russia doesn't put its attention to this, it could find itself with not just instability, but basically conflict breaking out in this region. I know Russia has a lot to worry about. Ukraine is a big problem. The West, Europe, this peace with the United States, but I think Russia knows how to walk and chew gum at the same time, and I think solving the Georgian problem and then getting Armenia to come back into the fold would do a lot to prevent Azerbaijan from thinking it's bigger than it actually is.
Да, кстати, вы сейчас сказали,
That's
что
right.
когда Армения...
You said that when Armenia and Azerbaijan were signing their peace agreement with the mediation of Trump, you said that you don't know what the motivation of Trump is, if he wanted peace between them or if he had some other geostrategic plans. But I wanted to say that Donald Trump looks like someone who calculates his every move. That's my opinion. And if I may, I will ask you one more question.
Именно эксклюзивность сегодняшнего нашего интервью в том, что я разговариваю...
Our interview is exclusive, I would say, today, because I'm talking to you with somebody who is,
как вам сказать,
how to put it, who is on the other side of the battles, well, I mean geographically, because you are over the ocean, because otherwise you see that you're on the side of good and on the side of light. I have a question. When Russia tested the Archnik missiles or weapons, many Muscovites became very worried with these new weapons. How did the Americans react?
Well, America is a very big country and a lot of people. I would say that Americans who were knowledgeable about these systems, just to remind you of my own resume, I was a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union implementing the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the treaty that got rid of the predecessor of the Archnik, the SS-20 Pioneer missile, RSD-10, I think you call it in Russia. And there was a reason we got rid of this weapon, along with the Pershing II and the ground-launched cruise missile and other systems, because they were destabilizing. Because to have these weapons in Europe, created the potential of nuclear conflict in Europe. And the decision was made by both the Soviet Union and the United States to remove these weapons. So when I see the reemergence of these weapons as operational systems, it brings back memories of the instability that existed in the late 70s and early 1980s. I understand why Russia did it. I mean, it wasn't Russia that withdrew from the INF Treaty. It was the United States, August 2nd of 2019. Russia at that time said that they will continue to have a self-imposed moratorium on the development of these missiles as long as the United States doesn't deploy systems into Europe. But then we deployed for training purposes. And now we intend to deploy for operational purposes. So Russia then began to develop systems like the Archnik. And if Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov is to be taken at face value. There's other systems out there now too, not just Archnik. And then, because of the irresponsible actions of the West in promoting Ukrainian violence against Russia, Russia used the Archnik in a demonstration mode, and then moved to serial production. Today, Archnik is being made on a factory scale. I don't think Americans fully appreciate the danger of this weapon. First of all, it brings the capacity of Russia now to strike Europe strategically without using strategic weapons. That is, weapons that were normally allocated for the strategic deterrence mission against the United States and other nuclear armed powers. They now don't have to be diverted for a European strike mission. By having Archnik and other systems, Russia now has the ability to use this system and not diminish its overall strategic nuclear force. This greatly bolsters Russia's military posture. It puts Europe at risk because there might have been some hesitation on the part of Russia to divert strategic weapons to a European crisis. That hesitation will no longer exist because now they have Archnik and other systems. I also think the Americans don't understand the significance of Russia having used the Archnik. I mean, prior to this, nobody had ever fired an intermediate range strategic weapon in an operational since we've tested them, but no one ever used it in a hostile manner against an enemy target. Russia has used it. That's a precedent. That means that Russia will no longer hesitate. If there comes a time to use the weapons, they will use this weapon. And then the technical capabilities of the Archnik. It's a lot of speculation here. The Russians have been very reticent about what exactly the Archnik is. But from the basic understanding, it is a derivative of the RS-26 Rubieж, upgraded with modern technologies. It is a system that has multiple warheads. Those warheads have submunitions of extremely sophisticated manufacture using advanced ceramic materials that absorb heat, and it creates a unique effects profile that didn't exist before. I don't know if the West fully appreciates what the Archnik is and the threat it poses to Western militaries, to Western societies, if it's ever used in anger against them, because it won't be a single strike by the Archnik. If I read the Russians right, the Archnik, if several Archniks are used at once against the same target, you get an effect that could resemble the damage done by a tactical nuclear weapon. So you bring nuclear level destruction using a conventional weapon. That's something I don't think has sunk home with the West. I'm loath to tell the Russians what to do, but I would make the following suggestion. The more you can tell the West about the Archnik, the better. Because the more the West knows about the Archnik, the less likely they'll try and engage in policies that could result in the Archnik being used.
Ну вот еще интересный такой момент.
There is another interesting thing.
Обсуждаю в своих интервью
When I discuss with different people, with military experts, what the situation in the world is,
С одной стороны,
they are telling me, the Russian experts, that on the one hand, Trump is someone that actually reached several peace agreements or made other countries reach them. And, if we take your words about the Caucasus, he may be looking at the Caucasus too, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and he is trying to call himself peacemaker number one in the world. But on the other hand, Russian experts are claiming that Trump has a lot to win in the war in Ukraine, or at the expense of the war in Ukraine. So I have a question. What is more important strategically for President Trump? To be a world world-scale peacekeeper or peacemaker, or to let the war between Russia and Ukraine go on. What is your opinion?
Well, at the end of the day, we have to remember that Donald Trump is an American politician. And so we have to view things through a political lens, not necessarily a purely geopolitical lens, but a domestic political lens. He has a critical midterm election coming up in a year and a half. This election will determine whether or not his full term will be a success or a failure. He's undertaken certain actions that can only happen because he has control of both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House. Very narrow margins in both. If he can sustain this control, then the policies that he's undertaking have a chance of success. And it also creates momentum going into follow-on term. I mean, if I were the Russians, I would think of J.D. Vance as 8 more years of Donald Trump, meaning that if Trump wants peace, the best way to guarantee peace is, J.D. Vance becomes the president, because then those policies will be continued. But the point is, you're not going to have that if Trump loses midterm elections. If he loses midterm elections, then there's a good chance that his time in office will be seen as a political failure. And then we just have a return to the Democrats, and we go back to the nonsense of the past, because he wouldn't have been able to purge the deep state. People like me won't have been able to fully cure America of Russophobia. And so his actions have to be assessed on how they impact domestic political audience. Donald Trump doesn't work for the mainstream media. He doesn't work for academia. He doesn't work for the deep state. He works for the American people. His political base is the American people, and it's those American people who elected him into office. And those American people have certain expectations of the president, number one of which is to get us out of this war in Ukraine. So I don't know what your Russian analysts are saying. I would just tell you that there's nothing going on in Ukraine that's more important to the president than winning the trust and confidence of the American people. And if he continues this war in Ukraine, if this war continues and he's unable to bring about peace, and as a result, American-Russian relations flounder, this will be a political disaster for this president. He needs peace with Russia. And so I think you're going to see that he is going to move forward as he can within the constraints of reality to achieve an end of this conflict. I think one of the things that Vladimir Putin impressed upon President Trump in the Alaska, and again, this is just my speculation, but I think he impressed upon President Trump Russian reality. We see this in the way that President Trump shifted his foundational point of view. It went from there needs to be a ceasefire now, I'm going to demand a ceasefire, I'm going to punish Russia if there isn't a ceasefire, to we're looking for no ceasefire but long-term lasting peace based upon a fundamental solution to the root causes of this conflict. That's the Russian position. So we see President Trump able to absorb the Russian reality and alter his position. But now he has to fight a rearguard action against the people trying to stab him in the back. But no, I would disagree with anybody who says that Donald Trump has anything to gain from continuous conflict. Continuous conflict would be the political ruin of not just Donald Trump, but the United States and Russia. Not politically ruined, but we have a chance to get on the path towards peace. That will not happen if there's a Democrat in the White House. The Democrats are thoroughly infected with Russophobia. They were looking forward to a continuation of this war because they believed that by continuing this war, you could weaken Russia and strategically defeat Russia. I think Donald Trump now has an appreciation that that will never happen. In fact, the opposite is happening. Even though this war isn't the best thing that ever happened to Russia, Russia's become stronger from this. Its military today is the most lethal military machine in the world. Because of this war, Russia now has the Archnik missile in serial production. Russia has upgraded its nuclear arsenal. The Russian economy now can operate successfully without a dependence upon the West. Russia has made new allies geopolitically, China, India, Brazil, and others. BRICS has become viable at this point in time. So the longer this war goes on, the stronger Russia gets, the weaker the United States gets. So I think Donald Trump recognizes this and he wants to bring this conflict to an end. But as we've indicated, there are many enemies here in America who don't want him to succeed. And Donald Trump has to be very careful politically not to, just listen to what he said when Vladimir Putin responded, was talking. He said, our next meeting will be in Moscow. And Donald Trump said, I'll take a lot of heat for this, meaning he understands the political consequences of agreeing to such a meeting. He said he'd like to do it. Personally, I believe Donald Trump would love to do this. But politically, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for this president here in America today. He needs the support of the American people. And I'll leave you at this. Today, I'm publishing a letter from myself and others to Donald Trump, a report on my recent trip to Russia. And I'm letting him know what the Russian people told me, that they support President Trump's effort for peace, and they wish him the best of luck, and that he should view the Russian people, and by extension the Belarusian people, as allies in this cause, not enemies.
Да. Следующие несколько вопросов я вам хочу
My
задать.
next several questions are about human values, common human values. This is an issue that you touched upon with Nikita Mikhalkov. If we look at the Arab world,
Народы там проживающие, они не привыкли
we know that there are different peoples, different nations there, but they may not be used to this level of comfort as the Europeans are. To sit in a cafe, to go to disco, not to work, to have a good time all the time, and so on. So when the Arabs fight against Western values, well, they go to the end. But if you look at the Russian people, what do we see here? There was a Russian movie about the war, and, well, two German special operations officers are talking to each other. One German says to the other, well, a war is going on, but they are writing poems. Women are sewing dresses for themselves, and they are pushing us back all the time. Aren't you scared? And the other one said, well, yesterday there was an airplane flying over Moscow with the icon of the Holy Mother. So what do you think? Well, you think that God is supporting them? Well, it's not about God, the other German says. It's just about believing in miracles, and Russians believe in miracles. So if we look, if we forget about the movie, if we look at at foreign invasions against Russia in different centuries, many years ago, they wanted to conquer Russia, and then they failed. And I believe that the West is failing today again. Why is the West doing this? They don't have another way out, or, well, they believe that their heartland will die, or do they have a crazy idea that they have to conquer Russia?
The West is in search of enemies. That's the reality. Dwight Eisenhower warned about this back in 1961 in his farewell address to the American people. He warned about the military-industrial congressional complex, the addiction that America had to military weapons. You see, if your economy requires defense industry to grow, then you're producing things that require a war to justify. And so America is always in search of enemies to justify this defense expenditure. This is a harsh reality, and no president until Donald Trump has been able to or been willing to confront this head on. Now, Donald Trump is a complex man. He has made the right words, but his actions are far different. He then talks about peace through strength, which requires America to produce the biggest and best weapons in the world. So the defense industry is very happy with Donald Trump right now. Can he create a situation where we produce weapons for the defense of America as opposed to go on the offensive against Russia? Who knows? The Golden Dome system that he talks about is destabilizing. One, I don't believe it'll ever work. But two, the mere fact that Donald Trump is talking about this, if it did work, it would make Russia's strategic nuclear deterrence obsolete overnight. And this would be a very dangerous situation for Russia. So, the United States is in search of enemies. We need it to sustain our economic model. And the same thing with Europe. NATO right now, how do you justify NATO's continued existence if you didn't have a Russian threat? You couldn't. The European Union, how do you justify, the dismantling of centuries of European cultural traditions, in the name of a European identity that doesn't exist? What is Europe? What is a European? I know what a German is. I know what a French person. I know what an Italian is. I don't know what a European is. Neither do they. But in order to create this artificial identity, you have to have a unifying feature. And the unifying feature now, because of NATO's imprint over Europe, is that Russia is a threat. And this is the big problem we have, is that we've postured Russia as a threat. The solution, though, is simple. And some people might say I'm naive, but that when I was in the Marine Corps, my job was to kill Russians. I trained every day to kill Russians. It was the Cold War. You were my enemy. The Soviet Union was my enemy. And we were singularly focused on closing with and destroying the Soviet enemy through firepower maneuver. Every morning I woke up, it was how can I kill Russians more efficiently and how to prevent them from killing me. But then in 1987, Ronald Reagan signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty with Mikhail Gorbachev. And suddenly I was taken from a position where I was told to train to kill Russians, and now I've put in a new position, that of a weapons inspector, told that I have to work in a collegial fashion with Russians. They now aren't my enemies, they're my colleagues. But colleagues is a strange word because it doesn't bring with it automatic friendship. I can be colleagues with somebody but still be cool, even hostile towards them. But I lived in Vodkinsk, city in the Udmurtskaya Republic, foothills of the Ural Mountains. And for 2.5 years, I had to learn how to live with the Russians, how to work with the Russian people. And in the process, I learned to like the Russians. And this is important because once I learned the Russian reality, once I learned that Russian people are just like me, they wake up in the morning with the same wants, the same desires. We speak a different language, we have different culture and stuff, but at the end of the day, we want peace. We fall in love. We want children. We want to pass on a better life to the next generation. We tell jokes. Some are good, some are bad. We like food. Some food we don't like, some we do like, but we're human beings. We're the same. And the second you realize that, the concept of going to war with Russia becomes absurd. I left the Marine Corps because I no longer believed in killing Russians. I believed in defending my country, but I didn't view Russia as a threat to my country anymore because I had met the Russian people. And I do believe that the antidote to this hostility towards Russia is learning about the Russian reality, meeting the Russian people. That's why I promote citizen diplomacy. And if we do that, then all these politicians who posture Russia as a threat, Russia as the enemy, nobody will believe them. And then the will of the people will be reflected in whom we elect. If we fear Russia, we elect politicians who say we must defend ourselves against Russia. But if we learn to respect the Russians, to even like the Russians, we won't elect politicians and say they're the enemy. We'll start electing politicians that say we need to be friends with the Russia. We need to learn how to live peacefully with the Russians. It's a long road ahead of us. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of twists and turns, and there's going to be obstacles. But we're on a good journey. It's a journey towards peace, and I hope that we can complete it.
Где-то неделю с лишним назад я делал
About a week ago, I was interviewing with somebody who established the Council of
И он мне в интервью сказал, что американцы
Foreign Policy, Sergei Karaganov, one of the most influential organizations in Russia, and he told me that Americans believe, every American thinks that he's the Messiah. What do you think about this?
That I'm a Messiah? Americans are taught from an early age that America is the exceptional nation, that we're the shining city on the hill. And, there's nothing wrong with aspiring to be a shining city on the hill. Who doesn't want to live in a shining city? I do. I'd like to live in a shining city. you know, but Americans are also influenced by what they see on TV, what they see in the movies, what they learn in college. And if we're taught that we are the only force that matters and the rest of the world is lesser than we are, then we sort of have a messiah complex. Yeah, we think we can solve all the world's problems, that we're the good guys, we're the cowboys with the white hats that ride in on the white horse, and we shoot the bad guys and everybody wants us. The problem is that's just fantasy. Because more often than not, we may view ourselves as the cowboys with the white hats and the white horses, but people view us as the Mongols coming in to rape and pillage and destroy, because that's the end result of our intervention. We don't know how to effectively intervene economically. Every time we intervene economically, it comes with strings. We say, we'll give you money, but you must do this, that, and the other thing. In Georgia, we told the Georgians that they have to change their foundational family values. You know, in the United States, we are more tolerant to alternative lifestyles. But that doesn't mean that Georgia has to be, tolerant, or Russia has to be tolerant. We have to respect people, but we don't. We think that we have the best way, and that if people aren't going to be willing to do it our way, then we have to change them. And that's what a messiah is all about. I guess the good news and the bad news is as follows. The good news is the American people are starting to see the world differently. The bad news is because we're having problems here at home. It's hard to be a messiah. It's hard to say we live in the shining city on the hill when we wake up every morning knee deep in sewage. America is a nation where we have crumbling infrastructure. Our education systems aren't what they should be. We are deeply divided politically. We have serious crime problems. And, this wonderful nation that was conceived to be the melting pot of the world, meaning that anybody who came to this country could be absorbed by this country and become an American citizen. Today, not so easy anymore. We're becoming an exclusive club of elitists. And so that's the bad news, is that America is starting to fray, starting to crumble. And the world doesn't want America to crumble. You don't need the American messiah, but you do need the American people. We're hardworking. We like solving problems. We like creating problems too, but we can get over that part. We like to solve problems. We're innovative. We're nice. We're kind. We're open-hearted. Anybody who's traveled to America will tell you the Americans will take the shirt off their back to help you. We want to do the good thing. It doesn't mean we always do the good thing, but we want to. We're inclined to do the good thing. We just need to we need to fix ourselves first, and heal ourselves. And once we are on a more solid ground, then we'll have the confidence to stride into the world, not as a messiah, but as an equal. It takes a great deal of confidence to be equal with somebody. You have to be pretty confident in yourself to say, I'm your equal. A person who's not confident tries to posture as being superior. I'm better than you. I'm better. Why? Why do I have to be better than you? Because I fear you. I'm not confident in myself. But to be equal with somebody, that's the epitome of confidence, because that means that I'm comfortable with who I am. But I respect who you are. America is going to have to learn how to be equal with the world. It's going to take some doing, but I'm hopeful that that will happen. So yeah, we are infected with the Messiah complex. But I think that those days are going to end, and what is going to emerge, hopefully, will be an America that is so confident in our abilities that we're comfortable being the equals with everybody else in the world.
Можно часто услышать,
We can hear very often
что
people saying that
европейские элиты
European elites
подверглись процессу разложения в духовном плане.
have been undermined spiritually.
Представители уходящей настоящей европейской культуры,
And,
Ален Делон,
such actors as Alain Delon, singers as Toto Cutugno, Marie Laforêt, very well-known singers and actors, they were very sad about this. They would say that Europe is getting Americanized, taking the worst from America. It is making everything standard, the same food, same everything. Yes, America is a young state historically, but if we look at America, Ernest Hemingway, Theodore Dreiser, Jack London, Mark Twain, well, it's a culture. It's a great American culture. America has its own culture. It has brought a lot to the basket of world cultures, but America is becoming different, as Europe is becoming different. And I believe that many things are being undermined in America. So my question is, do we blame America for this, or is this a world trend? Is something happened to us, to humanity? But if we look at the Arab world, if we look at Russia, let's take Russia, well, I don't believe that we see this tendency in this part of the world.
Well, I think Russia knows the danger of falling in love, blind love with America, more than anybody else. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a decade in which Russians stopped loving Russia. They weren't proud of who they were. They weren't proud of their country. They looked around, they saw, collapse and crime and, no functioning economy and corrupt government and oligarchs. And they looked to the West and they saw this dream. And they said, I want that. That's what I want. I'm a Russian, but I want this. I want the West. I want to be like the West. And they forgot who they were. That's one of the greatest tragedies that can befall a people or a nation, is to forget who you are. Look, I love that people want to come to America. I think it's great. I like showing people my country. But I don't view you as an American when you come here. I view you as who you are. I study your background, your history, and I really appreciate people who are proud of who they are. One of the things that I like about Russia today is, in a large part because of 25 years of very strong leadership, the Russian people today love Russia. They love being Russian. They're proud of who they are. And I think this is amazing. I'm not threatened by it at all because I love my country. I'm proud of being an American. I love who I am. And I have no problem, working with people who are as proud of their country as I am of mine. It makes you stronger. It makes you better. It doesn't mean that you can't appreciate American music. I would hope you do. It doesn't mean that you can't watch a holiday movie and go, "Oh, that was pretty entertaining." But it does mean that when you go home and you watch Russian cinema or old Soviet cinema, you say, "That's my movie. Those are my stories. Those are my culture. This is my music," and you're proud of that. I think the problem with Europe is that Europe doesn't know what it is anymore, because they've tried to create this artificial European identity that just doesn't exist. A German isn't a German anymore. A German is supposed to be a European. An Italian is supposed to be a European. And as a result, their traditional values, their cultures, the thing that defined them, that made them unique, are no longer resonating inside the soul of these people. And Europe has become a continent of lost peoples. They just don't know who they are. So, and when you lose self-identity, you need to then mirror image somebody else. And I think right now Europe is trying to mirror image the United States. They're trying to be Americans, but they're not. They never will be. They're going to be who they are. They should take a lesson from Russia. Fall in love. If I was a German today, I would say I would want to fall in love with German culture, German history. I would want to, be proud of my language. I want to be proud of my cinema. I want to be proud of my culture. The whole thing. And then now when you step forward, people say, "There's a German." Now when a German steps forward, you're saying, "Is that a German or a European?" I don't quite understand. The Germans don't even know how to answer it. One of the greatest, I think the best point I can make about Germany today, let me make it clear this. If you invade my country, I'm going to die for my country. And I'm going to kill as many of you as possible. You will not get away with invading my country. It's my home. Just like if I invade your country, I would fully expect every Russian to try and kill me because that's your country. It's your home. And a recent poll said that if Germany was invaded, only 16% of Germans would be willing to die for their country. that means Germany no longer exists. It's a non-entity. And that's the problem with Europe. People no longer identify as something. What are they willing to die for? Because if you're not willing to die for something, what are you living for? The joy of life is to enjoy those things that mean something to you, things you want to protect: family, home, country, history, culture, religion, language. These are things that, define who I am. And if you try to take it away from me, I'm not who I'm supposed to be. So I will then defend it with my life if necessary. Russia believes that. Every Russian I spoke to believes the same thing about Russia. Europe, they don't do that. It's very dangerous. And as an American, I think it's very bad. I don't want you to be like me. I really don't, because then you'd be fake. I want you to be like you, who you are. Be true to yourself. But the thing about American culture is it's addictive. It's easy. It looks easy. But look at America today. We have become a nation that's so accustomed to taking the easy way out that we forget that sustaining success requires hard work. We built a nice big bridge, but we built it 60 years ago, and we didn't repair it. And today it's threatening to come down. Now we have to build a new bridge, but that's a lot. That's very expensive at the time we have to do it. America had something that was great, and we didn't sustain it. And now today it's starting to fall apart. We've got to really work to bring it up. Russia today has built something that's pretty cool. I mean, and I guess if I visited Belarus, I would see the same thing. A nation that's built something that's pretty cool, populated by people that love who they are. Keep it that way, man. Keep it that way, because that's better for you and it's better for me. Because now when I meet you, I know who you are. There's no mystery. But if you're trying to be like me, I don't know who you are. I don't recognize you. You're fake. You're not me. You're not real. You're something else. But when I go to Russia, I'm meeting real Russians. We don't agree on everything. That's okay. I don't agree with my neighbor on some things too here in America. But we don't go to war. We talk it through. We agree to disagree. We agree that we love to live. That's a pretty good thing to agree upon.
Хочу вам задать в конце вопрос.
As one of the final questions, I want to ask something that I ask everybody whom I interview. Could you name 3 books that influenced you as a personality?
I easily could. I read extensively. If you look behind me, I have a bookshelf, and it's there. Professionally, I was an intelligence officer, and it's a different kind of work. It's a work that is not just technical, but it's emotional, especially if you deal with human aspects of intelligence. You have to get involved with the emotions and the psychology of people. And there's a book that I think touches upon this better than any book in the English language, and that's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy by John le Carré. It's my go-to book whenever I want to immerse myself in the fragility of the human nature, because spying is about exploiting human failures, human fragility. And it's important to understand that we people aren't perfect, that we have many flaws, and that if we don't work to protect our flaws, to improve our flaws, those flaws can be exploited by others. And that's unfortunately a lot of what's done in this intelligence business, is exploiting the human flaws of others. It's one of the reasons why I'm not in that business anymore, because I don't want to be in the business of exploiting human mistakes. I want to be in business of helping people to fix their mistakes and move on in a positive fashion. So, that book is one that I read often. There's another author named Leon Uris. He wrote a book called Armageddon. It's a book about the Berlin crisis, Berlin at the end of the Second World War, about the occupation. And it's just a fascinating book because it's your typical story of America riding to the rescue. But we're confronted by realities. We're confronted by the German reality. Are they our enemy, or are they people that we feed. The whole Berlin airlift was about Americans flying food into the western sectors of the occupied capital of defeated Nazi Germany. And it, so to me, it was just, I read the book when I lived in Germany as a teenager. And so I would travel to Berlin and I would see Berlin. And it just resonated with me. And again, it's a story about the human condition. And stuff. Now, in college, I studied Dostoevsky. I took an entire seminar on Dostoevsky, and of course, it would be very easy for me to say, "Oh, Crime and Punishment," or The Idiot, or any one of his books, Brothers Karamazov. But as much as I appreciate Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Chekhov and stuff, I think it's Mikhail Sholokov's book, "The Quiet Dawn," the Tiki Dawn. I read that book in college, and I couldn't put it down. I just read it. The characters are so real. The fact that he tells the story from the perspective of a white, a person who's sympathetic to the white cause, also was unique. Because when I was studying Russian history in the 1980s, almost every filter we got was a story told from the perspective of the Bolsheviks, or the victorious party. The way he wrote this book, and just the depth of the story and the depth of the characters, it made me appreciate that the Russian people are far more complex than what I was being taught in universities. I was being taught that the communist system is evil and that the Russians are a bunch of robots who obey their communist masters and such. And then you read this book, and you study Sholokov's history, and you know that he was alive during the time of Stalin, that this book was written during the time of Stalin. And it made you realize that, no, it's far more complicated than this. It's far more nuanced. And that the Russian people are just like us. The story he tells could have been told about the American Civil War. It could have been told about any domestic conflict, but it was told about the Russian Civil War. And that's one of my all-time favorite books, The Quiet Dawn.
Спасибо вам огромное за такой интересный ответ. Вообще беседа получилась необычайная.
Thank you very much, Scott, for this wonderful interview. It was a wonderful dialogue, a lot of content, and I hope that you will give me a chance to take another interview from you another time. And so this is the На связи, in content or in touch program. My name is Evgeny Davutov, and please subscribe to our channel. You can send your comments and watch us. And military analyst, ex-major of the U.S. Marines, William Scott Ritter, was my wonderful guest. Scott, William, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Hope to talk to you again.
Союзное Вече представляет актуальная повестка, новые факты и волнительные прогнозы только в программе Евгения Давутова «На связи».